Welcome to Beacon Bits. I'm your co-host, Serge Boudreau, and every episode I will be joined by my co-host, Yves Boudreau. We delve into the world of work from the employer and employee viewpoint. Kick back, relax, and let's talk work. Beacon Bits starts right now. Bonjour and welcome to Beacon Bits. I'm your co-host Serge Boudreau, and as always, joined by Yves Boudreau. Yves, how you doing, buddy?
Doing good. Finally, I can say it. I'm doing good. Yeah,
you're doing good. You're healthy, and I heard the reason that you're feeling healthier is because you bought like a walking treadmill under the desk type of thing. What the hell is that?
One of the hottest purchases in the holiday season. Everywhere was sold out. I finally found one. Yeah, there was like almost every model I looked at was sold out of stock.
Yeah, how does it work? It's just like a smaller treadmill type of thing?
It's awesome. Yeah, that's what it is. You just put it under your desk, and I have a standing desk.
Okay.
And it weighs like 25 pounds. It's quiet.
Don't you need a lot of leg room because you're like 6'5"?
No, it's perfect. So, I mean, I'm not running on it. I'm walking on it.
Yeah, but you still have long legs. Or do you walk like an old person?
No, it's a good length. It's probably like 4 feet in length. Like I'm running right now. You can't even hear it.
Are you? Okay, you ready?
Yeah, it's on right now. You can hear the beeping, but I was like pretty unhealthy the last quarter with just COVID and pneumonia and a bunch of other things that we don't need to get into because I had to stop hockey. So I basically decided, hey, I'm just going to start walking. I'm going to keep it simple. I think the first day I came back after visiting my parents for the holidays, I think the first night I walked like 7 kilometers in just random places in town that I had never been to.
Yeah.
And so
walking around town.
Yeah, just walking everywhere. And I was like, hey, this is pretty good. Like, it's pretty good for the head. So then I kept doing it. And then I got myself a Oura ring that tracks all of my biometrics.
I'd love to see the report on your sleep with your Oura ring because I know you're a night owl. Like I remember getting texts from you at, it was like 10 o'clock my time and we have a 3-hour time difference. So it was 1, 2.
Not supposed to reveal those things.
Yeah. They weren't those type of texts.
No, I'm just saying that I'm up at 1
a.m. business related, right?
Yes. So my sleep score, I've never been one to like obsess with those things. So what was really interesting for me, there's a number of things that I've changed that I didn't realize was impacting me negatively since I got my ring. I'm not sponsored by Oura, but hey, Oura, like you should sponsor this podcast. Probably one of the coolest investments I've made. My sleep score during the holidays was 85 on average, which was really good. But the thing is that I realized that I didn't know how bad it was my brain just doesn't shut down. So when I go back into work mode Sunday after dinner, it's like I start thinking about the week. I start thinking about things that I need to do or follow-ups. So my average sleep score my first week back was 58.
58.
Yeah. I was getting about an hour and a half to an hour and 45 minutes of deep sleep, REM sleep during the holidays, and during the regular week I would get about 30 minutes of deep sleep and 40 to 45 minutes of REM sleep. The biggest thing that I've changed is my wind down before going to bed, not spending as much time looking at the news or reading anything not in front of a screen. The other thing that I don't play a lot of video games, but I do have a PlayStation 5, and I didn't realize the impact it had on my heart. So I don't play any of the Call of Duty games because I knew without something monitoring me that was not good for me. But even just regular video games, and my heart rate really does go up quite a bit.
Oh, interesting.
So, yeah, more than I expected. That's another thing that I'm like, you know what, I'm not playing on these nights anymore. And then I bought my walking mat. So I've been using every single day, doing an average of about 4 kilometers a day while at the office.
So 2025 is going to be the year of health for Yves. And this is not a New Year's resolution, right?
Don't believe in that.
In December, you're moving forward. You're going to be healthy.
Yes. And then you should do the same.
I definitely should. You know what I'm lacking? Going to the gym, which I'm fairly consistent generally, and also going for a walk out in nature every day, getting outside of my basement here with no windows in my office. Like it definitely helps on the mental health side outside of physical benefits. I got to do it. I just got to do it. And I've been sick the last couple of weeks. Not that we want to talk about that, and it gets you out of a routine, and now you feel depressed. So
Mm-hmm.
definitely need to get back in my routine and be healthy.
Do you have a
Uh,
standing desk in your office, or is it one that
I
you can
don't
go?
know. No,
Yeah,
I have a standing desk that I can put on my desk. Big part of the challenge is the ceilings are 5'10", and I'm like 5'9.5". When I'm standing up, it's pretty much hitting it. And don't roll
I
your
think you're
eyes.
being generous with 5'9.5".
Yeah, no, I'm not being generous at all. Anyways, let's change the topic now. Let's jump into what's trending in the news. And it's become quite common for us to talk about the Canadian job numbers because the December job numbers came up. And let me give you the highlight. Right now, the unemployment rate has dropped slightly from 6.8% to 6.7% in December. There was an unexpected job gain. The economy added 91,000 jobs, far exceeding the forecast of 25,000 jobs. Most of the jobs were full-time, which is interesting. There was a significant increase in educational service, healthcare, finance, and transportation sector. 40,000 new jobs came from the public sector, while private sector remained fairly modest at 27,000 jobs, and self-employment rose by 24,000 over that period as well. A little bit of a wage growth. So average hourly wages rose 3.8% year over year. And this has been the slowest increase since May 2022, reaching $35.77. Before I go more into the economic outlook, no surprise. Last podcast, we talked about the November numbers and the trend that we've seen over the last 4 years, which I think a lot was, I don't want to say it was covered up, but no one really dug into the numbers in depthly. I don't think we realize how big the public sector has been in job creation within the last 4 years, and it's continuing. I do want to put a couple of caveats when it comes to public sector. Public sector does include healthcare job in Canada. If that's driving it, fantastic. But that's not exactly what we're seeing as you dig in deeper. There is a lot of government bureaucracy jobs, and this is not only federal, it's provincial, also municipal, that's been growing pretty substantially. Not good news, in my opinion. Even though the employment rate went down, I'm not seeing this as a positive trend, but I've been
Also
called a
1 month.
negative Nelly.
Yeah, you're a negative, Nelly. No, it's also 1 month. The fact that people were surprised, especially most economists were surprised. Like, we'll see if we have 2, 3 months in a row. I'll take that as a positive sign. But right now, I'm just going to go like, okay, was it an anomaly? Was it just timing? Who knows? But we'll wait and see how this one holds up in 3 or 6 months from now. But there's so much uncertainty happening on the political side of things as well that I have some ideas of what might happen, but I'm not a professional.
Well, we're going to be talking quite extensively on what that possible impact
Yep.
is, because before we dig into it, just to give you some numbers of export dependent Canadian jobs. So 8.8% of Canadian jobs depend on US demand, especially in Alberta's oil and gas and also manufacturing sectors. So on that note, I think we need to jump into trending in the news. And here in Canada, obviously, it's been top of the headlines, and some of it a little bit ridiculous as far as Trump coming out and calling Canada the 51st state. But there's definitely some deep concern on his proposal 25% tariffs on basically all Canadian goods. And obviously, we've had different responses across the board. And this is not a political show in any way, but we are in a really interesting time politically with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau resigning, leadership race for the Liberal Party ongoing. And by the time this airs, the inauguration would have happened, and we'll probably know more if these are actually going to be imposed on day one. So before I dig in a little bit deeper, do these tariffs concern you as a business owner and leader?
They terrify me.
They terrify. Oh, I love it. I love it. Finally, something clever that comes out of me.
No, so I was reading the Bank of Canada report, yesterday because they're going to announce another rate cut in January. And it's suspected that they probably will not after January until they understand a little bit more of what's going to happen following that, especially with the US. What they're concerned about is it becomes a terrorist battle. Like, okay, if the US does this, and obviously Canada's going to retaliate. And what that means is it's going to stall essentially a lot of the recovery efforts that are trying to happen right now because they're going to have to be cautious in how they approach it. So we might be looking at the last interest rate cut for a while until they have more clarity on that. I think there probably will be some because I can't see Trump making all these promises and not actually pushing some of it. It might be on some goods, it might be on certain sectors more than some other sectors, but I can't see being a blanket tariff 25%. That would be detrimental to not just Canada, but to the US itself. There's things that I want to say that this is not the show for it.
Well, I can be that person. Let's just look at what the possible impact to the job labor market. What Doug Ford is saying out of Ontario is that this could potentially cost 450 to 500,000 jobs. Quebec came out with not as big numbers, but definitely in the hundreds of thousands of jobs across the board as well. And obviously, every province could be impacted. Alberta is an interesting one, as always, because the majority of our trade is oil and gas, right? They're buying a lot more oil and gas. And here is where we're at. We have put ourselves in this position. I'm not being political. I'm being a business person here. If we had pipelines that were actually delivering our oil and gas to other markets, this would not even be a point of discussion. We would have all the leverage because we could literally sell our oil to everyone. For people that don't realize this, we have no markets for oil and gas. We ship it to a discount to the US. We have lost all leverage when it comes to our major export, which is oil and gas. So this is going to hurt across the board. I think this is going to be very challenging for Canada if it happens. I'm going to make a prediction, though. Oil and gas is going to be exempt from the tariffs.
Yeah, it's possible. But like, it can't be the only thing that would be exempt. And again, I think this is a little bit above our pay grade in some ways. I definitely feel like I read more than maybe the average person in terms of what's going on. And I draw my own conclusions based on what I'm reading and what could happen, especially what you're talking about with the oil and gas pipelines. But what I'm concerned about is the timing too.
Yes.
Because our Canadian dollar is already weak. And so this is actually going to have a detrimental, not just to job creation, but also to our weakening Canadian dollar. It puts the US in an even stronger position than what they already are. And that's the concern that I have when we lose buying power in the US, when we essentially just tilt it so bad. You know, at some point, I don't want to say that it'll get to that, but like if we're at the point where like our dollar's worth 50 cents US, yeah, we're in trouble. I like to start on a more positive note for the start of the year, but yeah, I'm trying to be optimistic is what I'm saying.
Oh, I'm glad you are. I think we've talked about this. There's definitely challenges when it comes to a Canadian economy, and there's been for a little while, and I would feel more optimistic about the American economy than I do about the Canadian one. And this is nothing of the workforce or anything like that. I just think the dynamics, and you're completely right. Our dollar is, I think, 68 cents, 69 cents to the American dollar. They're starting to call it the Arctic pesos.
So the crazy thing for me is it's absolute insanity right now. Do you know what the global debt is?
$360 trillion. Who do we owe that money to is my question. Like,
it's just
like Mars? If the world has 360, who owes that money to who?
Yes, to the aliens.
To the aliens? This is where we need an expert here because I don't get it.
It was funny because I think it was probably Elon that was making fun of it. But it just tells you, I don't think anyone really cares. Like, people are like printing money. So that's where I get a little confused. Maybe our next guest will be someone who's a little bit more versed than we are. But none of it makes sense to me right now. Like, our Canadian dollar sucks. It seems like we're at the mercy of the US more than we've ever been. But then the US has the second largest global debt in the world. But then they're still like one of the world's biggest superpowers.
Yeah. But let's take a step back.
Yes.
for Canadian businesses going into 2025, this is a deep concern, right? Like for SMBs to larger enterprise, this is something that we have to be talking about, and we need to figure out a plan B across the board of, okay, if this does happen, what are you doing in your business to make sure that you are remaining solvent, so you're not put in a position that you have to go out of business or you have to take on more debt. I think it's a real risk. And I think the next 4 years, there's going to be some challenges on this end, but we can only control what we can in Canada. And then going deeper into your own business, the focus has to be executing on what you can do and limiting your risk in the US as much as possible, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's unfortunate in some ways because like now would be the right time to do more business in the US. I can tell you that the provincial level, the governments are having conversations on contingency plans to support the business community because some businesses could die overnight from these because that's the margins. People are definitely not taking it lightly because essentially in the US, you have a baby at the control board who's going to hit whatever button that are in front of him.
All right, I want to jump into the big topic, and I think this one is a little bit more optimistic, but hopefully doesn't trend in a pessimistic light here. We want to talk about the top priorities for CEOs going into 2025.
Oh, that's going to be negative.
So before I go into this one, what's your top priority going into 2025?
Top priorities for us is internally is to just be a better company, continuously be more efficient. Like the two things that we've implemented is better health and wellness policies from this point on. And then professional development budgets are unlocked again on our side. So just trying to get our team to learn new skills and grow individually because we're not a big team. So we don't want to fill necessarily every task with new people. So yeah, we're just trying to be better. And I think we need to start thinking with more confidence again with the business, even though it's been a tough couple of years with a slowdown in the economy in Canada. Like we just can't just wait for things to get better. We got to try to influence that as much as we can. So that's our priority, but generally be better.
Yeah, I think that lines up with exactly what CEOs are feeling right now. As if you look at the top opportunities they're seeing, education of their workforce is critical because the skill sets that are needed to be successful, as we've talked about, are changing rapidly and they are going to continue changing. So that was at top of the list as far as what CEOs are looking at. Obviously, if we look at innovation, that is key as well. But if you look at the things that they feel that they have to get right for them to be able to position that they can innovate and grow, still attracting and retaining top talent was the number one priority. And I know we're definitely in the employer market. There's a lot more job applicants. There seems to be less hiring across the board. It doesn't mean that CEOs are not focused on getting the best quality people for their organization so they can grow. The other aspect, and I think this ties in exactly what we talk about, like in innovation, how can we enhance people's productivity? Is this AI? Is it automation? How can we help employees be more productive? I think this is a huge challenge in Canada.
Yeah.
Our productivity rates have gone down dramatically, especially since the pandemic. How can we grow our employees so we're competitive at a world stage, which the data doesn't show that we are right now in Canada specifically? The other element is developing leadership capabilities, upskilling and reskilling talent, which kind of lines up, enhancing culture and employee well-being, the impact of automation, including AI on talent, and building HR teams' capabilities and analytics. I wanted to bounce this off you. I was reading what are HRs and CHROs' top priority. Diversity and inclusion was still ranking number one. And no one is saying those are not important, right? As an organization, please, let's be clear on that. But there is a misalignment of CEOs and CHROs across the board as well. And I think as HR professionals, we have to look at, okay, what are CEOs focused on and how can we align to that? And how can we make sure that they're executing and we're executing as an organization on those top priorities that CEOs have? So what's your thoughts on that?
The priorities are not surprising that you just listed. That's kind of what I would expect. The lack of alignment's always been there. So if anything, it will get more aligned, I would say, in the future, because I don't think there'll be any options.
Yeah.
You asked me on the last episode what was my biggest prediction for 2020, and you caught me off guard because I wasn't really thinking about it, but I actually thought about it during the holidays.
Okay.
My biggest prediction in 2025 is that companies will run the way they want to run unapologetically.
Yes.
That's my biggest prediction.
Okay. That's a good prediction because we're seeing that already. What was the announcement this week with Meta? I think they're laying off their bottom 5% of their workforce, which is interesting. They're purposely calling out that we're cutting the bottom 5%, which, to be honest, really sucks for those employees, right?
Yeah, it's a terrible way to announce it.
It's a terrible way to announce it, and it's a terrible way for those employees to go out in the workforce. Be like, oh, you just got laid off the latest round. You were in the bottom 5%. That's what
Yeah,
it means.
one of the largest companies in the world. Yeah. Well, Microsoft
Um,
did something similar. So Microsoft last week or week before, their announcement was a bit startling for me because until this year, the message from these companies were always like, oh, like, yeah, it's going to impact job, but it's also going to create more jobs. They actually came out 2 weeks ago where they said, so two things. One, we're going to be investing $80 billion in AI in 2025, which is an astronomical number. And then two, is they're gonna, I'm not even going to try to say that word again.
try it again. What's that number?
No, I'm not.
Astronomical.
And number two is they admitted that it's going to actually result in job loss. But then they said we're actually going to let go of our least performing people on the team. So very similar to Meta. And then Electronic Arts did the same thing. So the president of Electronic Arts came out afterwards and said that in the gaming industry to expect a lot more losses. So I think companies now are just like, hey, we're just going to run this to maximize profitability. And you're going to see more of it, unfortunately. We talked about this before. As soon as one company does it, everybody else jumps on that bandwagon.
You know, we were talking about this, and I think we both had the opinion at one particular point that they're building this to make us better at our jobs. Let's take a step back to that. That's going to happen, right? Yes, it's AI tool is going to be critical for a lot of people to be more efficient,
Yep.
and it's going to make people better at their job, more productive. Yes, that's going to happen. I don't think in Silicon Valley, as they're building AI tools, that they're building it for employees to be better at their jobs. A lot of it is being built to actually replace jobs. Not saying that's a negative, because anytime you have new innovation, usually new jobs, industries, and stuff are just created naturally and the jobs change, right? But to be under the perception that all of these AI companies are building tools, products, and everything just to make your job better, no. Like, you got to be wary that some of this is completely created to replace jobs 100%. There's no doubt to that, and that's becoming clearer and clearer. And I'm glad you mentioned the Microsoft announcement, because they basically just said that, like, hey, yes, it is going to change jobs. We're seeing companies laying off whole contact centers with AI agents. I'm not saying that's going to be good, right? Like, I think eventually we're going to get to a point that there is pushback from some folks. But yeah, no, the world is changing pretty rapidly in that sense. But I love your prediction the other way, because I think Meta was a perfect example of, there's some people that don't care anymore, especially CEOs. They're just saying it that 3 years ago would have been just crazy. Like Mark Zuckerberg going on Joe Rogan and saying the workforce needs more masculine energy. Can you imagine saying that 3 years ago, 2 years ago, and it's getting limited pushback out there?
That's the byproduct of, first of all, it's obviously Trump being back in power definitely gives permission, but it's also a byproduct of just extremism on both sides, where people are just like, if I hear woke for every single thing that someone doesn't agree with, oh, that's woke, or cancel culture, like, lose my fucking mind. But it is a sign. It is a big thing. Like even the fact that they're changing how they're policing commenting on Facebook. They're removing their dedicated team and replacing it with the community notes. Yeah, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but it does show you how all of the FANG companies are jumping on they're like, yeah, this has money attached to it, so we're going to jump on it. So
yeah, I agree. I think where do we get to that happy middle? It's not going to be a priority, especially for CEOs. And I agree. I think CEOs are going to want to drive their business and will feel less hindered by what's socially out there in the past that could be something you could get canceled, right?
one thing that people don't realize too is, first of all, I'm not saying that I agree with any of these. The whole jumping on the Trump bandwagon right now pisses me off, because even Coca-Cola, who gave Trump a big scolding because they didn't even want him to show the Diet Coke product for a while because of the January 6th insurrection that happened, they created a commemorative bottle just for him to commemorate his inauguration. So everyone's just caving into the dollar, which I shouldn't be surprised, because a lot of these organizations, what they don't realize, the CEOs, they're not personally like, hey, I want to make more money. Some of them might be. A lot of them is, I have this pressure from my shareholders, I have this pressure from our investors that I need to essentially make as much money possible for this organization to keep growing. And you have that lingering with everything. It does get to the point where you're just like, hey, I just don't have the bandwidth or the option to do anything else. But I'm conflicted between the two of them. But for me, as a CEO of a very small company, I do see some parallels over okay, you just got to start doing what's right, because in the end, you'll have no company to show for it.
No. Well, you have to have employees that are following a mission that they can get behind as well. So it's going to be a very interesting couple of years. Just putting that in context, I think CEOs are definitely lining themselves up for what they feel is going to be the more profitable strategy for their organization.
They're all coming together, even the ones that didn't get along, the Elon and Zuckerberg, and even I think this week was Jeff Bezos and Elon were
Musk, yes.
congratulating each other on their successful launch or lack of successful launch in the case of the SpaceX launch that went yesterday. But yeah, I think the CEO of TikTok was invited to the inauguration, even though they're basically saying that they're going to ban TikTok.
Okay, let's leave it on this. All right. Is TikTok going to be banned in the US? By the time this airs, we'll be right or wrong.
It won't be.
I will do the opposite. It will get banned. And when we say ban, it's going to be a slow dribble off, right? Because it's just taken off the App Store, and future updates you won't be able to. But you're not completely shut down on TikTok. It's going to take a little while before American users don't have access to it. I predict it will happen because TikTok will not sell to an American company. They feel the algorithm is way too good and there's way too much information, which kind of proves the point of why it should be banned, because there is so much information out there. But anyways,
no.
Sorry?
I'll put $6 on it that they're not going to get banned.
All right, $6 deal.
Okay.
All right. On that note, that's another episode of Beacon Bits. Yves, anything planned for the weekend?
No, which is just fine by me.
Nothing planned.
Hockey, back to hockey, and that's about it. You?
Just taking care of kids. My wife is bringing our oldest to a camp in Banff, so I'm by myself with the twins, so we should have a lot of fun. There's going to be a lot of bad food and sugar, and they're going to love me. So on that note, have a fantastic week.
You too. Au revoir.
Au revoir.